welcome to the second session of ConNext 2024 about the interesting and at times challenging topic, cleaning. My name is Henning Schulze from the University of Lincoln in the UK.
And I'm Shane Rivers of Western College of Art and Conservation in the UK. And Henning and I will be hosting the session today. But before we move to the presentations, let me just remind you of rules for this and other sessions. Please make sure your microphone and webcam are turned off so that we don't disturb our presenters during their talk, and it saves some bandwidth as well. We encourage you to use the chat box to ask for questions or for hints or any remarks. We'll try to address these in the Q&A session. These sessions will be recorded, and that will mean that we can share the contributions with a wider audience, and that wider audience means you as well as any future or past students who attended. So this is a conference for and by students, so please respect one another. Only the speaker's exceptional and remarkable efforts make this possible.
So welcome to this second session of ConNext 2024. Because we probably have some new audience members, here's just a short introduction how ConNext came into being and what we would like to achieve. ConNext is a joint effort of the conservation training programs of the universities of Antwerp, Amsterdam, Hildesheim, Cologne, Lincoln, Thomas, Westdean, Delaware, and La Combre in Paris. With all within the field of wood and furniture conservation, some programs also incorporate polychromy and modern materials, and therefore the partners in ConNext provide a wide variety of subjects. Our ambition is to connect you, the students, with your international student colleagues and to give you the opportunity to share your work and your questions. In our fourth conference, it seems that we are more connected than ever. For this series of ConNext evenings, we have a large number of participants from different educational and research institutes from 12 different countries. Education is paramount for the future of our field, and it starts with sharing. Sharing your hard work, experience, and knowledge. ConNext tries to provide a platform for this exchange. We also hope that aside from ConNext, you will continue sharing during your studies and your professional lives. As the ConNext team, we would hope to build a confidence and experience to encourage you to send in your work for conferences like those of ICOMCC, Ebenist, or Future Talks. So let's make ConNext 2024 an international platform for emerging conservators, rhetorics to meet and share their knowledge. So we think you are excited as we are to kick off this fourth ConNext session with a slightly changed program for the first part, as we have not one, but on this occasion, two of our established keynote speakers who were so kind and eager to participate in this event. Let's ConNext.
Thank you, Henning. Yes, it's my honour to introduce today's first keynote speaker, Dana Melchiar, who I had the privilege of working with for many years at the V&A, and she is an outstanding furniture conservator. So she still works at the V&A for the moment. She can update you on the progress if she wishes to. And she's also lead tutor of wood and decorative surface conservation at City and Guilds of London Art School. She's an ICON accredited conservator. She has a Master's of Science in Art Conservation from the Winterthur University of Delaware program in art conservation, where she specialised in furniture, and where I did my internship in furniture 30 years ago. She holds a Diploma of Cabinet and Furniture Making from the North Bennett Street School in Boston, and she received a BA in English Lit from Roger Williams University. At the V&A, where she is at the moment, she's lead conservator for the conservation of Asian and American lacquers, as well as treating and advising on the materials and techniques of furniture and wooden objects. So she co-organised the landmark conference of lacquer in the Americans at the V&A almost exactly a year ago to the day, and her talk this evening is called Cleaning Treatments on mopa. Dana, thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm so excited to hear your presentation, and the screen is yours.
Fantastic. Shane, thank you so much for the introduction. It was a joy working with you and great to participate this evening and opening up this edition of the ConNext focused on cleaning. Now, I can't see my presentation. Yep, okay, great. I see it now. So I'm hoping that this is going to go smoothly, but bear with me. Okay, let's try the next slide. Terrific. So today I'm going to discuss and share my approach to cleaning the South American table cabinet that you see pictured here on the screen. And it's coated with a resin known as mopa and a decorative technique known as varnished pasto. So my journey, along with that of my colleagues at the V&A, began when this cabinet that you see pictured on the screen was bequeathed to the museum in 2015. Now, at that time, we didn't know much about this technique or this material. So I'm going to share what this core team of my colleagues, which features lead scientist Lucia Bergio and curator Nick Humphrey and myself, what we've learned about this material and how we are facilitating an exchange of knowledge about American lacquers through, as Shane mentioned, conferences, one we hosted last year at the V&A, as well as publications, including a special edition of MDPI's open access journal Heritage that's specifically devoted to these American lacquers. So when the project started, we were really at the beginning of trying to understand what this object was and how we were going to go about preserving it the best that we could. So today, the first part of this story is the journey that we went on to figure out, what it was, and for me personally, to learn about mopa, otherwise known as varnished pasto. So varnished pasto is the decorative technique that uses this natural thermoplastic resin known as mopa. On the screen, you can see two maps. Now, varnished pasto literally translates to varnish of pasto, which is on the map on the left where you see the red star. That's where the modern city of Pasto is, and it is now in modern day Colombia. And on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see a map that shows the Andes mountain region up the west coast of South America. And that's important because the trees where this natural resin comes from grow specifically in the Andes mountain region at a high altitude. So the resin itself is collected, and now we know that it's only collected by about 10 indigenous families in that region of the world. And it's quite remarkable. It looks like you can see it here on the screen. It's a little bud that grows at the end of the branch of a tree. And here is a picture of what it looks like when it's growing. It's about the size of a chickpea. And it is a protective coating that covers new leaves. So if it stayed on the tree, it would actually disappear as the leaves grew and be absorbed by the plant. But when it's harvested at this point, it can be boiled together in water. And then what's really remarkable about this technique is that other resins that we're used to working with, where we paint them onto the surface, this resin, in fact, is more similar to a chewing gum, if you can imagine, and it's pulled and stretched into a thin film that is then applied onto a substrate. And so here on the screen, you can see on the left-hand side is Maestro Granja, who is a master of this technique. He currently lives in Pasto, Colombia, and was over last year as part of our conference to demonstrate how this material works and to show us the technique. So there, along with one of the audience members, he's pulling the film, and on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see where once this film has been stretched, it can be cut into all sorts of designs and be applied directly onto an object surface. One of the things that's also very unique about this material is that you don't need any adhesives. It is, once there's heat applied to the material, it's self-adhesive and bonds to itself into the wooden substrate very effectively. This, I thought, is a really interesting historic print because it shows two barnistadors at work. And while the contemporary artists, are able to use hot plates and pots of boiling water, here we can see these historic indigenous artisans working with the heating source with an array of objects that they would have decorated with this technique, giving it a little bit of a context. So getting back to our object, we learned a little bit about what the technique is. We wanted to confirm that, in fact, this object was decorated with this indigenous South American resin. And wanted to know more about the technique. So I began by doing a very in-depth examination in the studio using visible light and magnification to see the surface. And of course, once I was looking carefully, we identified some sample locations so that we could confirm the resin by FTIR. So in fact, this is what you can see was our results. And we had a fantastic match of a sample that we took from this cabinet with reference samples in the IRUG database. So once we knew that, in fact, we had mopa, then, we just started to the process of acquiring it, but also to think about its preservation. On the screen here, you can see two images of the surface of the table cabinet under magnification. And there's two things that I want you to notice about this. On the left-hand side, we can see that there is a coating on the surface that has a lot of craquelure to it. And in fact, it has some islands where we're seeing a much smoother material underneath. And in fact, what I was able to see was that we had a non-original coating on top of the mopa. On the right-hand side, there is, we can see those light lines and the light circle there in the center and a dark brown circle. And the dark brown area is where we have a loss of the decoration. So through looking carefully, I learned a lot about this layering technique that the artisans use, where they're applying different pigmented or dyed mopa on the surface. And I can see through this image here that this varnish was applied at some time after the cabinet was made, because of course we've got the resin inside an area of loss. And this was, of course, important, knowing that the resin coating on the surface was not original, because the cleaning, the first stage of cleaning in this project was to think about removing this resin varnish on the surface. And it was through, again, looking carefully, including using ultraviolet light that can be so helpful, where I wanted to get a sense of what materials might be on the surface of this object. And looking at this image here, we can actually see there's also, maybe you can see my little pointer. We've got some adhesive, it looks like some adhesive fluorescence here. We have metal mounts with no coating on them. They weren't fluorescing. And there were other materials on the surface in addition to this natural resin that, with the help of the scientists at the V&A, we were able to confirm that it was in fact a resin based with a copal amber component to it. Working very closely with Lucia in the science department, we also started to do some more analysis to understand what materials were present. And we all know how important it is for us to understand our objects before we ever embark on a cleaning protocol, so that we obviously don't damage it, and we tailor our cleaning to the specific object. So in addition to doing microscopy, Lucia also began doing some XRF analysis of the pigments. And this was particularly exciting, because what Lucia found, and here on the screen here you can see one of her cross-section samples on the left, and on the right we've got a spectrum from the XRF, and we've identified mercury, but not in reddish pigments like we might expect, but we're finding mercury in every white area of the box. And that led to us realizing that in fact we had a mercury chloride pigment here, and it was the first identified deliberate use of a mercury chloride pigment in a artistic object. Now, we also had different results on the inside of the lid of this box. This was the photo micrograph on the left-hand side, but you can see it has a much different spectrum than we saw with the mercury. And in fact, here we're gaining information that we have a surface on the inside lid of the table cabinet that has been repainted with very contemporary pigments and materials. So as part of this scientific investigation, we also did X-radiography. And I thought that this was going to be confirming the construction details that I could see during my examination. And like you can see on the screen here, I can gauge a history of nails being used in the repair of the box. And in fact, it was a very helpful technique for me to see these images. But we also had some other surprising discoveries. So this is the fall front of the table cabinet. You can see I've also removed all the mounts to facilitate the examination. And here we see the inside of that fall front, and I show you each of these separately because I want you to see when we saw the X-radiograph, we have those two surfaces that have the mercury-based pigment all over them, superimposed over one another, because when the X-ray it goes through both surfaces. So that's what we're seeing in that image. Through the visual examination, I could tell that this had been catastrophically broken in the past, and there's big cracks in the substrate. And so gaining information to think about if there were some wooden splines that may have been used. We can see there's here some disruption in the surface. So again, we're just expecting to see very much like what we saw on the fall front previously. This is an image of the inside of the lid, and this is where we discovered all of those modern pigments that I showed you in a few slides previous. So we knew that this was actually, we identified the binder. It was an acrylic paint, and all of this is non-original, and the artists that did this took a lot of care to mimic designs that they saw on the exterior of the box. And we thought that perhaps they had done this because the inside of the lid might have been very plain. So when we saw this X-ray of the inside of the lid, I was together with the curator, Nick Humphrey, and we were so surprised because right in the middle of the screen, we saw this skeleton, which doesn't relate to what we are seeing on either surfaces of the lid. And here's this wonderful skeleton, and we can start to get glimpses of other sorts of motifs on the surface that are not visible currently. This led to so much excitement that we wanted to find out as much as we could about what was hidden underneath that modern acrylic. So we contacted colleagues that are at the National Gallery London, who allowed us to bring the lid over to the museum and to use their XRF mapping machine to get a better sense of what we had on the inside of the lid. So you can see Lucia over there on the right. I'm there escorting the lid. And this, we received some terrific information. So this on the screen here is a map of mercury only that is from this surface that currently, has this non-original acrylic paint. We're only seeing mercury at this stage and focused on inorganic elements. We also were able to isolate titanium. So here's a map of titanium, perfectly matching the decoration that we're seeing. And we were also able to gain a hint at the history of the surface of this object. So this XRF map, we can see mercury in the red and lead in the white on the screen. And more information. So on the top, we've got mercury. This blue in the middle is calcium. And in the green, we have lead. So it's really informing us about this history of repair that we had on the surface. And with all of this information gathered and thinking about the best preservation of the object, it was agreed that the first stage of the treatment for this box would be to leave the painting as it was on the inside of the lid, but to focus on removal of the varnish on the exterior of the box. And this was because it was very yellowed. It was had this craquelure pattern throughout, so really obscuring the appearance of the object. In some areas, it was so degraded that initially, when I was doing tests on how to best clean and remove this non-original coating, I tried a little bit of a friction clean with a flat instrument. And while it powdered some of the varnish in areas, in other areas where the coating was more intact, it wasn't very successful. So that led me to talk to a lot of colleagues, especially my painting colleagues, and read more widely about typical and non-typical painting removal strategies on how I could target the removal of this varnish. And it was especially challenging because in doing my research, I couldn't find any information about mopa, what its solvent sensitivities were, and I didn't have any mopa to experiment with. So I was very cautious in the approach that I was taking on how I was going to remove this coating. I finally, after doing some small tests in areas, I decided to trial gel treatments and modeled my treatment on a two-part gel, which was found to be the most effective. So these are the steps that I took, and I began first with a PVA borax gel of 1-methyl-2-pyrrolidinone, and that I used to remove a bulk of the varnish, and that's pictured all the way over on the left. And when that gel was applied, I could really see it working because the gel would turn this very dark brown. And I was very cautious about making sure that I wasn't dissolving any of the mopa, especially looking to make sure that, I didn't see any pigments or any colors that I was not expecting. So in the middle here, you can see the swab, and this is very typical of what was being removed from the surface. And also the entire time that I was working on this object, I was working under magnification so that I could see exactly what was happening with the surface. So once it was sufficiently thinned, I then used a pemulin gel with benzyl alcohol. And that you can see pictured on the right-hand side. And it turned the remaining varnish on the surface, this milky white, that I was able to agitate just a little bit and to remove from the surface with a swab and then rinse with the deionized water. And I hope you can see in the sequence of these photographs how it went from being, you know, kind of a murky brownish appearance to being really vibrant and crisp and clear at the end of the varnish removal process. And this is me working under the microscope in the studio, and an example of clarity that I was able to achieve in the cleaning that I was doing. So here's the side on the left, which is a before treatment. Here it is over on the right side after the varnish was removed. And I also was able to uncover some decorative elements that had been hidden. So on the left-hand side where the white circle is, you can see there was a crane with its talons just kind of out floating in space. And on the right-hand side, I've uncovered a skull. Now, looking under the microscope, I thought initially it was a loss, and because that mopa is all layered on the surface, it looked like it was a depression. So I thought that it wasn't there. And what was really nice was that during the cleaning, I was able also to reveal this skull and this original decoration on the object. So there is on the left-hand side the before treatment, on the right-hand side the after treatment. But this was very much the first stage of what we've done. Although that treatment on and off took me about 6 months to carry out. Because I had no reference of what this object looked like, I was really reassured when within the V&A collection, 3 objects that had been acquired by the museum in the 18th, forgive me, in the 19th century, had in fact a tonal range that was very similar to the surface that I acquired. So these had been acquired by the museum because of their silver mounts and had been in the metal collection, but it was our curator, Nick Humphrey, who started going through and investigating what South American objects we might have in our collection. And he in fact found these objects that are indeed mopa and very similar, in fact, in technique and in palette to our table cabinet. So that was really reassuring to know that what we had revealed was very much in keeping with these objects that had no coating and were very well preserved. So the next step that is still in process at the moment is the paint removal from the inside of the lid. So remember, we've got this amazing skeleton on the inside of the lid of the object with this acrylic overpaint that Lucia, through her pigment analysis, was able to confirm could not have been applied any earlier than 1958. So it was decided by our curator, and in conjunction with a conversation, that we were going to remove this much later acrylic overpaint to try to reveal this original decoration. And what we're seeing on the screen is as much as we knew about what was on the inside of the lid. And we're seeing about half of the decoration because we're not able, through the XRF mapping, to gain any information about the organic pigments that were used. So I did some testing to get off, the acrylic paint, and we all are familiar with acrylic, and was able to very easily in my test area with some xylene take off that acrylic. So I thought, oh, fantastic, this will be great. I also tried some Evolon, but in fact, that wasn't it. It wasn't as effective as the little bit of agitation with the swab. So here I am in the studio, getting ready to take off the acrylic. I was initially going to just use damp swabs with xylene, but in fact I found that the free solvent wasn't as effective as I had hoped with the removal. I ended up using a carbapol xylene gel, which worked so much better. And the other thing that was going on at the same time is, and you can see kind of just over my shoulder, because we knew there was a skeleton under the overpaint, everyone was very excited and wanted it recorded and documented. So I had lots of people in the studio as well as cameras recording the process, and in fact it's on YouTube, so you can see this process on the V&A channel. Here it is, kind of halfway done. You can see I've worked on the borders here, and it was just stunning, the colors that were coming through on this protected surface. But also the other thing to notice is the condition on the inside of the lid was much more compromised than anywhere else on the object. And in fact, the repairs that we had a hint of through that XRF mapping with the calcium and with the ground that was trying to, I think, probably level out the inside of the lid, but it also has had a lot of mechanical damage through, it looks like probably a scraping. So here the camera's filming every step. We left the skeleton to the very end. And here it comes. So this is the inside of the lid with just most of that acrylic paint removed. And the big surprise was this wonderful skeleton there, but also the lettering, and that this is really a mystery. It's a puzzle. It's known as a rebus, and we think that it's a combination of sounds made from the letters that you can see, along with the symbols that have some particular meaning. Now, we still haven't solved what is being said on the inside of the lid. We think, and our curator Nick Humphrey has been doing a lot of research, that it's about death, clearly, but also with the arrows and the scythe, and we've got a church in one area and maybe a house in the other. He's gaining lots of input from people around the world that have been writing into him about what this means. As far as the cleaning, I am now actually looking to remove some of the fill material, particularly the calcium, the gesso fill that's on the surface, because it was no concern really given to it going over any of the original mopa. So I'm trying to just reveal as much as we can of the original material, and then going to probably tone out where we have that gesso, so that original decoration, what's left of it, can really speak for itself. We've done lots of publications on what we found, both of the pigments and of the process of removing the varnish, as well as sharing information about mopa, and trying to connect the community both to enhance knowledge about this material, but also about the processes that we've used. So here are some sources for you. And thank you all so much for your attention and for letting me share with you about this journey that I've been on, cleaning the surfaces of that lacquer box.
Thank you very much for your very interesting presentation on this traditional natural material, its decorative application. It was special to see the revelations through the research undertaken and the approach to the cleaning of these fascinating surfaces. So thank you very much. I would now like to introduce our second keynote lecturer of the session, Heinrich Piening. Heinrich is the Deputy of Conservation at the Bavarian Palaces Administration in Munich, and has previously leading their departments for wood and furniture conservation and the departments for archaeometry. Heinrich is a master cabinet maker and holds a BA in Conservation of Cultural Heritage, specializing in furniture and wooden objects from the Technical University in Cologne, followed by a BA Conservation Sciences from the Maximilians University in Munich, and he holds a doctorate in natural science from the Academy of Fine Arts in Dresden. It is a special pleasure to welcome Heinrich here, as we have been studying together in Cologne. Heinrich will talk about foams for the Dream King, presenting workings of foam in surface cleaning. So please go ahead, Heinrich.
Oh, yeah, Henning, thank you very much to welcome me. Best greetings from Munich from Nymphenburg Palace. So it's my pleasure to tell you something about our foam project we called Foams for the Dream King. The Dream King is King Ludwig II of Bavaria. And we had a lot of interesting work with his coaches when we tried to clean them. And I want to tell you about the results of our new developments and testing of the self-cleaning foam systems. So I need the next. Yes. The Marstall Museum is at Nymphenburg Palace, and we have a collection of more than 40 carriages and slides from the 18th century up to the early 20th centuries. And most of these carriages have only been dry cleaned up to now. So a surface cleaning by a restorer is very time consuming and cost intensive. Normally we expect around 1,000 hours per carriage. So it takes a lot of time and a lot of money. And it is therefore more interesting to think about and test alternative methods. The next one. The project idea started in 2015 when we try foam-based cleanings on one of the carriages the first time. And it shows that it is more or less simple to applicate the foams, and we only need a little of the cleaning liquids than we normally use by classical cleaning. And it was also easy to remove the foams by vacuuming. Foams have not been recognized as having their own cleaning effects. We asked the producers of Tensit how they work, and they say, oh, foams is more a good feeling effect, and they do not think they have their cleaning effects in its own. Form cleans the structural depths better than surfactant solutions. Gels and compressors were the results of our first testings, and we want to know why. So next, please. We asked Professor Drenkan at University of Strasbourg and Professor Stubenrauch from the University in Stuttgart. They are both experts in tensits and form, not only for cleanings, but they were really interested and said, okay, let's try to think about how forms really work on surfaces. And we try to get a fund for from the DBU to finance a PhD project, and it was successful. We got the money, and so we had the project development of a new innovative form-based cleaning concept. That I want to show now. Okay, next please. When we started, we had several questions. So, why does the form clean better than the non-formed solution? Which mechanisms are involved in the cleaning process? And what properties does the optimum cleaning form need? Next, please. Forms have different interactions and constructions. And one is drainage, that is the liquid gradient between the form bubbles. And coalescence is the popping of the forms when the form is instable. And Oswald maturation describe how the bubbles will change their forms and become bigger. And there are interactive physical effects inside of the bubbles, which are interesting for us. Also, when we describe instable forms. Next, please. So we start with cleaning with forms. Next. A form cleans effectively when? Next. No solution flows onto the object. So when we do not have any drainage. When dirt is absorbed by the form, which is called imbibition. And next, please. Cleaning process proceed quickly. So it is a mixture between instability and the time of the cleaning process. Okay. It was a little bit complicated to select the right surfactant because a lot of tensils used by restorers are not really helpful to produce forms. And in our first discussions with Professor Drenkan and Professor Stubenrauch, we discussed about the different tensils used in restoration, and they said, what will you do with this? They do not work really. It makes no sense to use them because they are ineffective and you can't get the full results with these, which are possible. So by the selections, we talk about only non-ionic surfactants are interesting for us. The ionic surfactants are too dangerous for our surfaces. The surfactant need a special structure with only a few reactive groups. And most important, they must be formable. And when we tested these tensids, we saw that only 1 or 2 from 100 are formable. So there are a lot of tensids on the market, hundreds, with different groups, but it was really difficult to get a tensid which was formable, much more difficult than expected. One criteria is we need a wide range of pH, which we need for different surfaces. So in fact, we want to get a surfactant which can be used between pH 3 up to pH 11. And there are some on the market, but they also have or make other problems. We would like to take tensids which are tested dermatologically, and they should be biodegradable, and they should be easy for post-cleaning from our object surfaces. Maybe with water or with other solvents like ethanol or benzenes or something like that. Okay, next, please. We started with different systems. We want to understand how they will work. The tensids will work. So we need a test dirt and a test mixture of oil and UV pigment, which is only suitable in oils, and in this case it was yellow 101. Next. And to prepare a form in a good condition and in the conditions you need, we took the double searing techniques for foam production. You need 2 searings locked together with lure locks, and you put in your tensid solution, and then you switch the searings to produce the form, and you will get a good feeling for the right form conditions when you do it several times to each side. So you need therefore 15 to 20 changes of the searing sides, and it is easy to get a definited liquid content on one hand, and it is possible to get definited bubble sizes, and we had bubble sizes 10 to 30 micron, and a liquid concentration around 5%. We tested 3 up to 10%, and around 5% it was really good. The next, please. For the testing observation, we created a special camera system, because it is easier to observe from the underside to get good pictures from the process. So on one hand, we had an UV LED, and underneath there is a camera and an objective, and it was possible to observe the fluorescence from the testing objects. The next, please. So on the right-hand side there is a short movie. Maybe it is possible to start. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So this is a time-shorted process, and what you can see is the oil, and the UV marker is on the glass, and the form will and the tensor will reduce these oil from the glass, and only the oil remains on the glass is has the fluorescence, and it is you can also see that it is easier with an unstable form. Otherwise, the oil didn't move into the form. Okay. So the form in itself works. We got some answers. Why does the unstable form clean? And which mechanisms are involved in the cleaning process? Next, please. Okay, on the one hand, we have an effect called imbibition. We have, if you look to the detail of the bubbles, you can see there is a dynamic flow system. And together with the flow system, the dissolved material will move into the form structure, and will be picked up by the form. So on the other hand, new form will move back to the surface again, and will push up the cleaning process. Next, please. And we have a process we call wiping, because of the instability of the foam bubbles and the Oswald maturation. The foam moves directly on the surface, and they do something like wiping with a cloth or something like that, or a sponge. And that do the form in itself. So the form works when it degrades. Okay. So the mechanism is working in a combination of wiping and imbibition. And these, in this combination, it is really effective. And depending on the bubble size, when you start, it is really easy to remove dirt from fine cracks, because your cleaning system only works directly on the surface and do not move to the sides, it moves up to the form. Next, please. So we try this first with oil and the UV marker, but it also works with testing dirt. For example, a mixture of of oil and carbon black, and it is possible to show that also bigger pigment particles will be taken into the form by imbibition and wrapping. Next, please. So, going to practice. You can see some of our coaches from the exhibition. In this case, these are coaches in the slide from King Ludwig II. And you can imagine how difficult it is to clean this structure only by cotton clot. Next, please. We tested our forms on small objects like the flower or this ornament on the so-called Waagscheit. And we put on the form and let it stand there for around 4 minutes. And then we take it off by vacuum and clean with small water and a brush, and then take it off again by vacuum cleaner. And we try to find some residues of the surfactant, and it was not possible to detect them. So we are sure that we didn't left tensids on the surfaces. Next, please. One of our largest carriage is the coronation carriage of Emperor Karl VII, which was built in Paris in 1721 or 22 by Gobelin Manufactory, and it was bought second-hand for the coronation. And it was reworked in Paris on the occasion of coronation of Karl Albrecht as an emperor, Karl VII, in February 1743. And it was renovated for King Ludwig II. He was the last user of this carriage in 1867, and it was not significantly restored since then. And it was only dry cleaned before. The carriage is also at the Marstein Museum in Nymphenburg, and it is a monster carriage, because it is more than 6.80 meters, and it is around 3.5 tons heavy, and it is not possible to move it to any directions without a very high risk and a lot of manpower. So it had been done. It had to be cleaned there at the Marster, and also on public. Next, please. So about the object. The surface has a completely oil bond primer. It is all oil gilded and has an oil resin varnish. And for the cleaning process, we expected around 1,000 working hours. We had the experiences from the other Ludwig II coaches, and we made tests before form cleaning, just with the solutions without forms, and we gave this project to a freelancer, and they got an introduction to the cleaning process by Dr. Schad before they started, and before they tell us how much it will cost for us. And we said at first we can ever cancel the cleaning process in any time. So if we have a problem in between, we can stop the whole cleaning process. Next, please. There must hopefully be a video. Yes. This is a part of the carriage at the entrance door. So this is a preparing process of the form. She measured the tensile solution and prepared the double searing. And now she's preparing the form. And it was necessary to twist 15 to 18 times, and then you can put on the form, and the form is stable enough that it can be used upright. It do not move on surface a lot. So with 60 cubic centimeters, you can clean around 10 to 10 centimeters, and the form must be in a thickness of around 8 to 10 millimeters, that the form works in best condition. So by using the vacuum cleaner, it is possible to take off the foam and the dirt without having a wet process. It is easy to use a fine brush just to move the dirt from the deeps. And by cotton clod you can take off the dirt in the deeps, and after cleaning it was dried up with a micro fiber hand glove. Next, please. The results of the cleaning. We had different cleaning solutions with different pHs. 3, 8.5, 11 for different areas. The solution based on buffered diammonium citrate. We had a sugar-based surfactant, normally used in baby shampoo. For the reworking, we took distilled water, and for the whole carriage, we had 6.5 liters of solution, and the total working time was 350 hours. So when we started, we expected 1,000, so it's a really good result for us. Okay, next, please. As you can see, there is a big difference between before cleaning and after cleaning. And for us, I think it was a success to clean up this carriage by foams. Okay, next, please. So the conclusions. Foams have a self-cleaning effect when they are optimized. Optimized means good bubble size, good foam conditions, not too stable, but not in that way that they will run off. It reduced the cleaning agent by over 90%. It is possible to have a very gentle cleaning, and you can reduce the liquid up to 5%, and therefore it is suitable for sensitive surfaces. The next, please. There are some publications from the project, and Tamara Schad got her PhD, and we had several interesting results which we now can try on different surfaces, and we had some interesting, hopefully interesting publications from the results. Next, please. I have to say thank you to Cosima Stubenrauch, Nathalie Preising, Wibke Drenkan, Dirk Blunk, Preis and Flesterer Conservation, University of Stuttgart, my own administration, and Deutsche Bundesstiftung Umwelt. They made it possible to run this project. Next, please. Thank you for your attention, and do you have any questions?
Hi everyone. We'll come back to the questions at the Q&A session after we've had Jens Steffen's talk, and we'll take questions for Dana and Stefan and Heinrich all at the same time. Thank you, Heinrich. That was an absolutely brilliant presentation. We're a little bit behind time, so let's move on to our first student presentation of the evening. I now have the pleasure of introducing Stefan Patt, who was born and raised in Lüneburg, which seems to produce a lot of really outstanding conservators. After a year-long internship with the restorer of wall paintings and furnishings in Stralsund, he trained as a carpenter. And when he'd completed his training, followed by an additional year as a journeyman carpenter, he started his studies in the restoration of paintings and polychrome wood surfaces at the Hawk program in Hildesheim. He's currently in the first semester of the master's program there and is working on a medieval crucifix from the 13th century, which involves extensive investigation into the object's coatings. Stefan, over to you.
Hello, thank you for the introduction. My name is Steffen, and today I will talk about solvent-loaded HVR Nanorestore gels, opportunities, limitations for varnish removal. First two questions I will answer today. How well can varnish be removed in comparison to Avalon compressors? And since the manufacturer's instructions for the gel mentions reusability, the question also arises, how well can the gel be reused? Why use compressors at all? Through the traditional method of removal with a cotton swab, solvent can penetrate the paint layer in a relatively uncontrolled manner. This can be somewhat mitigated by using compressors, as the retention properties of compressors tend to hold back the solvent, meaning only the upper layers of the painting swell. Of course, achieving this control is not entirely possible and somewhat idealistic, but it can help. A brief definition of gels. There are physical gels and chemical gels. Physical gels include substances such as gelatin, agar or cellulose, ether-based products. On the other hand, there are chemical gels like this Nanorestore gel. The difference between those two gels is that the chemical gel has covalent bonds. These are responsible for the fact that Nanorestore gel leaves no residue and gives the gel a stable form that can be cut. The Nanorestore gel, chemical gel in the Nanorestore gel is PHEMA. Embedded within this chemical gel is a semi-interpenetrating PVP molecule. These PVP chains are responsible for the high water retention of the gel. They are trapped within this covalent network. Because the network operates on a nanometer scale, it can also be referred as a nanogel. Here's a photo of the gel. The gel must always be stored in water. It is designed for aqueous application, but it also intended to be capable of being loaded with solvents. Just a brief overview of the materials and methods I used to test the gel. For the varnish removal, a test specimen was created. Here on the right, you can see the beautiful mock-up. The mock-up was treated with an orange varnish. The orange coloring is to enable the evaluation through color measurements. Additional methods were used for analysis, including photography, FTR analysis, and measurements of area and width. 3 solvents were used in the test: ethanol, isopropyl, and a mixture of isooctane and isopropyl. They were chosen because the first 2 are suggested by the instructions as being compatible, and are also very common solvents for varnish removal. Isooctane is also included in the mixture to see what happens when the gel is incorrectly loaded. And throughout tests are also done with Avalon, which serves as a control group. However, the compressor is loaded with solvents. It is shown here that the gel is placed into a container. 5 milliliters of solvent is added, then the container is closed, and 24 hours after this, the gel is removed and applied. With Avalon, it's a bit different. The Avalon is placed inside and its weight is measured. An amount of solvent equal to half the weight of the Avalon is added on top. The container is sealed, and after 24 hours, the solvent has evenly distributed throughout the compress via diffusion. Here's the beautiful test board with all the test fields on it. The compressors were cut to a size of 18 millimeters by 18 millimeters each to make the removal area comparable. The color difference between untreated and treated areas should be the indicator for varnish reduction. The removal process was the same for all tests. The compress with a piece of hostophan foil on top was placed on the test surface. After a certain period, the hostophan foil was removed, and then, after another set time, the compress was taken off the test object. Different times were used for each gel or compress to achieve a uniform removal result as possible for comparison. And for this purpose, varying durations were necessary. Let's now turn to the results. For a quick understanding of the graphs, the solid color represents the gel, and the dashed colors represent the Avalon compressors. From left to right, the polarity of the solvents decreases, and in gray, the duration of application on the test object is also indicated. It immediately becomes apparent that the gel compressors did not remove the varnish as effectively in the non-polar region, despite a longer application time. The Avalon compress, on the other hand, achieved a very uniform removal result and required less application time with non-polar solvents. Another interesting aspect is the swelling of the compressors. Here are 2 removal sites for comparison. One with ethanol in Nanorestore gel and one with isopropyl in Avalon. The gel compress swells significantly compared to the non-swelling Avalon compress. This is also indicated graphically. On the left in yellow is the original cut size. It shows that the compressor is soaked with ethanol, and the one with a mixture of isooctane and isopropyl have experienced the most swelling. Here are 3 gels compressors in this cross section before, during, and after application. It is assumed that the orange dye is an indicator of the solvent distribution after application. The 2 top fields are before and after being loaded with the solvent. After application, all 3 look similar. However, after re-immersion in solvent, initial differences emerge. The ethanol-loaded compress appears to absorb the solvent the best. In the dried state, one can clearly see how evenly the ethanol compress is colored in comparison to the other solvents, which are only colored around the edges. Okay, now to the next question. How good is the reusability of the compresses? In the test, ethanol was used as a solvent because it yielded the best results in the other tests. The compresses were loaded as in the previous test. However, they were then washed out and reused. Here 10 milliliters was used, preferring to provide more solvent for washing out than might be necessary. It immediately becomes apparent that the first and the second differ significantly. Here shown in gray the maximum possible reduction is shown. The first application actually yields a pretty good result, and the second application at the same duration shows a much worse outcome. And the subsequent ones are consistently worse than the first one. The reduced area is also quite interesting. Once again, in gray, we have the original cut, and then the first, the first swelling of the compress is very large, but after the first wash, the compresses shrink back to their original size and become even smaller. Naturally, one would ask what's going on here. The compresses are loaded with 99% ethanol, and after 24 hours, the solvent remaining from the loading process is diluted by the water present in the compress. If the ethanol content is measured again at this point, it stands at 90%. When the solution is measured again after washing, it is only diluted to 96%. Therefore, the lack of sufficient water could be responsible for the problem with the reuse. So the same tests were conducted again, but this time washing with 90% ethanol instead of 99%, since the 9% water seem to make an apparent difference. On the left, we now see the reusability test with using 90% ethanol, and on the right, for comparison, the first test with pure ethanol for washing. We can see here that the new washing method yields a better result. Here again, graphically, the maximum achievable reduction strength is in gray, and then the applications after the first are consistently good and on a similar level. The swelling of the compress is now more consistent. On the left side, we see the original cut, and of course it swells in the first time, but then it maintains its swollen size and does not shrink again. It tends to get even larger. Okay, now we come to the conclusion regarding the reduction compared to Avalon compresses. Here I present the reduction strength in relation to time. We see that the mixture of isooctane plus isopropyl in Avalon achieved the best result overall, and the gel compressors only obtain a better result with ethanol. However, it must be mentioned that it's not pure ethanol as with the Avalon, but rather an ethanol water mixture due to the compressors being stored in a watery environment and still releasing during the application. In terms of how well it can be reused, it's actually reused quite well and can be washed out. The results are relatively consistently good. However, it's important to note again that pure solvent is not used, but there's always water involved, and that the compressors must be washed out correctly for them to be reusable at all. When it comes to reusability, it must also be said that It does not completely eliminate the price difference with 1,200 per square meter for the gel compared to the Avalon with comparable properties and a square meter price of €6.40. In conclusion, yes, it is effective for varnish removal. However, it must be pointed out that only one type of non-aged varnish was tested, and and not all solvents that were tried. There's definitely room for more testing, which may very well yield favorable results for the gel or not. Also, non-polar solvent seems to not work that well, but to be fair, that is mentioned in the manual for the gel. When testing historical objects when the testing for historical objects, the incorporating of water for the test. Sorry. When testing the historical object is incorporating water into the test, the factor attributed to the gel, it can perform well. In the case demonstrated, it even worked better with ethanol and gel compared to ethanol and Avalon. In summary, it can be stated it works, and if there's a particularly unique scenario where only this method proves effective, then cost may be justifiable. Otherwise, Avalon appears to provide a very cost-efficient and good alternative. That's already it. And with that, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Steffen, for sharing your research and insights in your approach to removing varnishes. I have a 15-minute question answer session, and I see some questions have popped up in the chat box. Let's start with our first keynote speaker, Dana. Dana, Heinrich, and Steffen, could you please unmute the microphone?
The first question is from Mario Volta for Dana, who says she's already seen an example of the restoration on the box on the V&A YouTube channel, and it's great. She would like to know, were you involved in the production of the YouTube video, and are you also involved in other productions of this kind?
I'm not. Good question. So by production, if you mean the sharing and the deciding what we were going to share, yes. But we have a wonderful team at the V&A that leads on especially videos and outreach kind of content.
Sorry. Thank you. And Margaret Geis-Mooney would like to know, what was the approximate size of the working area initially using the gel?
Well, I started off pretty small, a few centimeters square, and I stuck to that. Sometimes it went a little larger, but it wasn't too big. Just a small area that I could see under the microscope very clearly.
Thank you. Velmud says, could you just repeat the date of the box? And
yes.
And
go ahead. Sorry,
he's
Shane.
asked. That's all right. And he asked what was in the PVA borax gel, and I answered that in chat saying that you'd said it was methylpyrrolidinone. So if I got that wrong, please correct me.
No,
so
you got
two
it right.
questions: date on the box, and why did you use this sequence of gels and solvents in them?
So the date of the box, we think it's probably around 1650, maybe a little bit earlier. And that's because there's a dated table cabinet very similar that's slightly we think later, and that dates to the 1650s. So it's around 1650 or a little bit earlier, we think. And I chose that sequence because I found it very controllable. I could see initially the thinning of the varnish, and then with the second application, of the benzyl alcohol, I could very clearly see where I had residues and remove it carefully. So I felt that that choice left me with the most control for the varnish removal.
Thank you, Dana. Velmut asked another question, which is, do you think every acrylic paint would be so difficult to remove? Velmut's asking particularly because we use it so much for retouching.
It was actually easy to remove the inside of the lid, but I found it much more effective using a gel, obviously, because it's so much better controllable than just using a free solvent.
Thank you, Dana. There are also some questions for Heinrich, our second keynote speaker. Heinrich, where is the carriage stored or displayed, and what are the environmental conditions? Is it out in the open or is it inside in a special storage place?
The carriages are stored in the Bavaria Royal Mews in Nymphenburg Palace, and we have a more or less stable climate conditions there, between 45 up to 60% and between 12 to 25 degrees, and all these coaches and carriages are in, I think, really good condition. They were never cleaned before and had several moves in between Munich from different storages, and they are on presentation since 1950.
Thank you very much. Velmut has also asked, could you repeat the name of the lock for the syringes, which I answered in chat. It's a Lure lock, and it's spelt in the chat, so you can see that. But Velmut also asked Heinrich, what surfactant did you choose eventually for the treatment, and do you think it would work on water gilding?
Yes, we took glucopone, which is a sugar-based tensit, and it is a little bit difficult to get on the market. You only can buy it with 140 kilos up, but for testing that is possible to get. We tried on water gildings. When the surface is intact and the gold is not flaky, it works. I had an example in my presentation, but we stopped the presentation before, so it is possible. If you want to try it on a gilded surface, it is also possible to isolate the grounding material with a benzyl, that the water won't be penetrate from the foam into the ground material. Then the foam works well.
Thank you. Velmut's obviously very fascinated by this process. I have to say I was very fascinated by it as well. And they would like to know what made you choose. So you mentioned in your talk a pH range of 3 to 11.
Yeah.
And I think, Velmut has asked what made you choose that pH range and between the different pHs, because it's a very big range, very wide range of pHs.
Yeah. We had some retouches on the coach which were based on proteins, and they are less sensitive on different pHs, and there were some corrosion products from metal fixings and so on, and they were cleaned in a better way with pH 11. It was more more effective.
Thank you. There's a question to both. Well, there's a question to Henning. If I understood correctly, Henning, this is from Sophie.
Yes.
Have you? Oh, right. Yeah. Have you mentioned you tried the foam method yourself, but it didn't work? What do you think went wrong?
So we basically didn't manage to produce a foam that was stable enough, but still unstable. So it remained largely liquid. Well, not largely, but there was a large proportion of liquid in it, so that and the foam itself did not stay on the surface where it was applied, but it started to run. So we have tried several times to produce the foam, repeated the method, tried to check that all the components were correct, and I assume that there must have been one glitch in it that didn't help. We used the same material. We got that as a sample from the British manufacturer or supplier, and followed instructions that were in the literature that Heinrich has indicated in his last slide. So I'm not sure what didn't work, but Heinrich will probably have experienced something similar and knows the reason why.
One problem can be the foam is not dry enough. So if you take too much of the liquids, it do not work very good. The next step is you need the right stirrings. If you take stirrings with a silicon pusher inside, it do not work, because there are very small remains of the silicon which kill the foam. That
will be the solution, because ours had silicone in them. Perfect. Thank you.
We tried that several times, and we had the same problems with these types of syrup.
Thank you. We will try. That's excellent.
Yes. So such a simple thing to go wrong, and yet it crashes the entire cleaning test. So question for Heinrich. Was gilding layer the only layer you found? Was there a toning layer present on the gilding?
Pardon? Sorry, I have breaks in your talk.
The question was it only a gilding layer present that you used the foam cleaner on? Was there a toning layer also there on top of the gilding?
There was only a varnish over the gilding, because the coaches are something like furniture made for outdoor, and they are really stable. The varnish is really stable.
Yeah. Okay. And I think another question is, and you've already partly answered that, because the question is, has the varnish been tested on gilded areas or also other surfaces like paints and varnishes and lacquer? Clearly it's been tested on varnished surfaces, because you've just answered that question. But are there any other surfaces that it might be appropriate for?
Oh yeah, you can use it also on varnished furnitures. It works really well, and you can take off something like wax polishes and something like that. And we also tested on metal surfaces, and depending on the pH and of the solution, you also can take off corrosion products as well. It works really good.
Is there any chance of suspending other components into the foam, like chelators or anything like that?
Yes, you also can add some complex builderers or something like that The most important thing is that the solution is water-based, and
Yes.
the pH range between 3 and 11, and then you can add the tensite as well, and you can produce forms with different complex builders with different functional groups and so on. It is not a problem. It works well.
So, thank you, Heinrich. As far as I can see, there are no further questions, but there are also some questions for Steffen. And the first question comes from Julia Schulz. So, how many times do you think the gels are reusable, and how many times do you test?
We tested 7 reuse, and in the seventh reuse was so good and comparable to the first that I think that it can be reused more often, but the gel becomes fragile after you notice that it's more fragile than the first application. So I think if there is much varnish to remove, it can be even faster full of varnish and not work as well. But I think also another limitation is that it just breaks.
Okay, thank you. Julia has a second question. And did you see some changes in the structure of the gel in terms of the degradation? And I believe you have answered that already, that it becomes more.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the next question is from Welmut. Did you test the Nanorestore gel next to other gels?
No, we tested only the Avalon because of time, and I already had experiences with Avalon, and both come in sheets, so they don't. It gels more. I don't know how to say. It can adapt better to the surface than a sheet like Avalon, and the Nanorestore gel is also a sheet, so I thought it would be fair to compare it to another sheet.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That's the end of the questions for those speakers. Thank you, Dana, Heinrich, and Stefan. And thank you to the audience for the really interesting questions, which have really helped understand some of those processes. If there are any questions that pop up for those speakers, we'll collect them and forward them on. We're going to have a 5-minute break now. So if you could get yourself, because we're running slightly behind, so have a quick comfort break and be back in 5 minutes time. So everybody check your time. On my clock on London time, it's 7:45. So we'll be back at 7:50 my time. And then we'll have 2 more presentations and then a Q&A session. So it's a short session after the break. So do try and come back and listen to the really interesting presentations from those students. So take a break and come back in 5 minutes time.
Hello and welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a good break. The first off after the break is Karay Klenner. Karay is a master's student at the University of Applied Sciences and Arts in Hildesheim, specializing in wood, furniture, and material combinations, and has completed her BA in conservation in 2023. Before her studies, Karay has undertaken a year-long internship in the restoration department at the Altena Castle in the Märkischer Kreis in Germany and completed a practical semester at the Atelier Käfer in Vienna, Austria. Karay will present about the possibilities and limits of the use of agar gel on unvarnished porous wood for the removal of surface soiling, and we are curious what these are. Karay, the stage is yours.
Hello everyone, and thank you for the introduction. In this ConNext session, I would like to present the results of my bachelor thesis, in which I tested the use of agar gel on unvarnished porous wood for the removal of surface soiling and pointed out the possibilities and limits. I wanted to test agar gel in wood conservation because it was already used in other fields of conservation, for example on stone objects, paintings and paper. So I thought maybe agar gel could also serve as a possible alternative to established techniques for cleaning wooden objects and furniture, because sometimes the established dry cleaning products or the cleaning with solvents are not always enough or even possible, for example on porous wood or wood without a coating. So at first I did some pre-tests to clarify fundamental questions. For example, how's the gel prepared and which concentrations, application methods or temperatures could be used. And then on these results, my main test series was based. So first I will show you the results of my pre-tests. I found out that a gel concentration with 2, 3 and 5% and a gel temperature of 60, 50 and 40 degrees Celsius could be used for the main test series. Also, a suitable gel layer thickness was 5 mm and an exposure time of 10 minutes. Furthermore, I was going to use some pre-made, already cooled down gel sheets, which I made in these boxes you can see here in the upper right. And I was going to use a wooden frame to pour and brush the heated gel directly on the surface of my test object, as you can see here down below. With these results, I had a plan for my main test series, which I carried out on this wooden board. I divided the surface of the object into 5 by 12 cm frames, so I had enough sections to test the different concentrations, application methods, and temperatures on one test object. And in the last row, I also tested some established dry cleaning techniques to compare them with the results of the agar gel cleaning. Here you can see the test object after applications. Because of the limited time, I will only present some of the macroscopic and microscopic results of a few samples. I will start with the test section for the agar gel with a concentration of 2%, which was poured at 50 degrees Celsius. As you can see, it was able to clean the surface evenly, but after cleaning, the wood appeared way darker than before. In the picture down below, you can see the dirt on the surface of the gel and also the structure of the pores of the wood after cleaning. This suggests that the gel was also able to clean inside the pores of the wood. This assumption was confirmed under the microscope. The gel was able to clean the surface as well as the pores, but there was also residue of the gel left behind on the surface and in the pores. The next example is the test section for the pre-made gel sheets with a concentration of 2%. As you can see here, there is less dirt on the used gel surface, which suggests that the pre-made gel sheet cleaned a little less than the poured gel. And that was also confirmed under the microscope. The dirt was removed on the surface, but not in the pores. But besides the different results between the application methods, there were also a difference between the concentration and temperatures. For example, the poured gel at 40 degrees Celsius with a concentration of 3% was not able to spread completely over the surface, as you can see here in the corners of the test section and the used gel. The concentration was also important for pre-made gel sheets. The pre-made gel sheet with a concentration of 5% was only able to reduce the surface soiling a little bit. And under the microscope, you can't really see a difference between before and after application. Because some dry cleaning products can compress the surface and push the dirt deeper into the surface, agar gel could be an alternative with less mechanical impact on the surface. So for comparison, different techniques for dry cleaning were also tested. For example, the cleaning with a brush and a vacuum cleaner. At first, it looked like there was only a small cleaning effect. But under the microscope, you could see clearly that not only the surface soiling was removed, but also the dirt in the pores of the wood. The last example I want to show you was the cleaning with an Patt dry cleaning sponge. I removed the residue of the sponge with a brush and a vacuum cleaner, and after that you can see that the surface soiling was reduced. And not just on the surface, but also in the pores. And in the end, there was no residue left. With my bachelor thesis, I wanted to get an answer to the question if agar gel could be a possible alternative to current cleaning methods on unvarnished wood. With the different tests, I was able to point out some advantages and disadvantages of agar gel. For example, when agar gel is poured or brushed on a wooden surface, it is able to clean the surface and the pores, but it leaves residues behind and the wood appears way darker than before. The pre-made gel sheets doesn't leave any residues, but only cleans on the surface. The dry cleaning techniques were also able to reduce the soiling on the surface and in the pores, but left some residues that had to be cleaned up with a brush and a vacuum cleaner. Also, depending on the dry cleaning product, they partly compressed the surface. There are still a lot of open questions and further research is needed. For example, why does the wood appear darker after the cleaning with poured or brushed agar gel? Is it because of the water or the gel residues? Or how could the residues of the gel be prevented or removed? On what way the use of agar gel increases the risk of a microbial contamination? Or last but not least, do we even need a cleaning into the pores, or could the cleaning of the surface with pre-made gel sheets be enough? So to answer my previous question, I would say that with further research and depending on the object, agar gel could have the potential to be an addition to current cleaning methods. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Karay. That was a really interesting talk. You see agar applied to lots of different materials. It's really nice to see it put onto bare wood. Our next speaker is Nicolas Hannay. Nicolas is a master's student at the University of Applied Sciences and Art in Hildesheim. He trained in carpentry and completed an internship at the Bayerische Verwaltung. For English speakers, this is the Bavarian Palace Administration. His interests are furniture conservation, metal conservation, and the use of 3D modelling in restoration and conservation. And he's going to be speaking about plasma-based cleaning of historical metal surfaces. Nicolas, the screen is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. I hope you still have some concentration left since it's fairly late in the evening. Yes, as announced, I'd like to speak to you about plasma-based cleaning of historical metal surfaces, which was also the topic of my bachelor thesis. Just for a quick structure, first I want to let you in on some context and theoretical fundamentals. Then I'm going to explain to you my experimental setup and the test methods I used. I'll show you my results and summarize the whole thing very briefly. Yeah, for some context. In 2022, several objects in the Boole technique arrived at the HWK and were to be studied there. Secondly, we have a center for the usage of plasma and photonics at the HWK branch in Göttingen. And knowing of the successful use of plasma in metal restoration, and since the plasma treatment of brass was not deeply researched, we had the idea to see if it was possible to remove corrosion products on brass using plasma, and if so, if it was possibly applicable to Boole-style objects. Now, I'm sure most, if not all of you, are very, very familiar with the Boole technique. So one of the shorter rundowns you've had of the Boole technique, it was popularized by André Charles Boole, a French ebonist, who used the combination of tortoiseshell and metal, mostly brass, sometimes silver, for marquetry. He underlaid it with a layer of colored paper. For contrast, usually it was red, sometimes blue. And the style had a renaissance in the 19th century, which is when most of the objects in the HWK are from at the moment. Plasma. It is a little bit important to understand a little bit about plasma to follow. Plasma is basically ionized gas. It is generated by running a current through gas, which is done by having two electrodes, left, right, gas in the middle, gas stream in the middle. You put some current through, and electrons of the gas molecules are accelerated. If enough, or if they're accelerated fast enough, electrons of the gas molecules themselves have the ability to accelerate other electrons of other gas molecules, which leads to an electron avalanche, which is visible as a glow discharge, as seen on the right, at an apparatus similar to what I have used for my experiments. I used for my experiments atmospheric pressure plasma, which is cold and can be used at room conditions. There's also low pressure plasma, but you have to involve a vacuum tank for it. So not very useful for furniture. Yeah, for the plasma effect on corrosion products, you have to use hydrogen gas in order to get an effect. Because if you use hydrogen gas and make it into a plasma, you get a lot of elemental hydrogen, which is highly reactive. This elemental hydrogen reacts on the surface of the metal with the corrosion products and reduces them to elemental metal. For example, using silver sulfide with the hydrogen, you get elemental silver and hydrogen sulfide. The pro of this method is that you have virtually no removal of any material. You're left with all the original metal that you started the process with, and it's minimally invasive. So it's very, very nice in the field of restoration. But you have a con also. You are left with highly reactive elemental silver, in this case, as a product, which definitely needs a protective layer or some sort of passivation. Otherwise, it's going to corrode very, very quickly again. Yeah, plasma. Of course, I wasn't the first one who has done anything with plasma. In the late 1970s, early experiments with plasma were done on iron. And the Swiss National Museum works successfully with plasma on archaeological objects. They have, I think, a low pressure plasma tank, which they use to eliminate corrosion products on those archaeological objects. And silver, the first successful silver experiments were done in the early 80s, early 1980s. And nowadays you can even use atmospheric cold pressure plasma with handheld devices to accurately remove corrosion products on silver threads on textiles. So it works in a very delicate way, and you can be very, very accurate with the process. And during the past, I think 5 to 10 years, there was an increasing amount of studies for plasma use on copper alloys. So I had some literature to consult on my bachelor thesis also, which was quite nice. For the experimental setup and test methods, I used small discs of brass made up of 63% copper and 37% zinc. I artificially corroded them using ready-made product called Tiffany Patina Black, and that consisted of hydrochloric acid, nitric acid, and sulfuric acid. Yeah, I plasma treated the samples for 30, 20, 10, and 5 minutes, and the gas I used was, as described, you have to use hydrogen, 10% hydrogen, and 90% nitrogen. You can't just use hydrogen gas because that would be very explosive, and many people would not like it if something blew up. The gas flow was 6 liters per minute, and the voltage applied was 400 watts. On the right, you can see the plasma generator I used, and the samples in the middle. For the test methods, I used my eyes and a microscope, so optical examination, and I did an elemental analysis using laser-induced breakdown spectroscopy. I also did a roughness testing using a laser scanning microscope, and I measured the temperature during the process, which was higher than I expected and higher than I would have wanted it to be at 83 degrees Celsius. For the results, for the optical examination, on the left-hand side you can see a corroded sample before treatment. On the right-hand side you can see a sample after 5 minutes of treatment. And you can clearly see a little ring on the top of the sample appearing. This ring becomes more visible the longer the treatment goes, and from 10 minutes onwards there are little points forming inside of this ring. They also become more distinguished over time. Same principle goes for the 30-minute treated sample. Both those features became more distinguished. Yeah, to summarize quickly the optical examination, as I said, the treatment causes those rings to form. They become more distinguished over time, and the little points inside of the ring become more visible over time also. There's some context to be added to this. The points in the ring closely match the exhaust of the plasma generator where the gas flow is coming through, and the plasma itself is made up of tons of little filaments, could be compared to little lightnings, which apparently, at least that's how I explain it to myself, have the tendency to strike always in the same spots and react with the metal in the same spots. That's how I explained to myself those little dots or points that you see inside the rings. Yeah, I also looked at those little points as one of the more interesting features on the sample, and I could see that they indeed become larger the longer the process goes. Maybe might not be very visible here on the new browser window, but yeah, they become more big. The elemental analysis. It is to say that there is, for the corroded surface, I could measure some oxygen, quite a lot of oxygen actually. Only 32% of copper and 13% of zinc. For context again, the starting values were 63% of copper and 37% of zinc. So we have a very, we have a big change there. And since I found oxygen, I derived must be some copper oxides and zinc oxides. I also analyzed the treated areas inside of the ring, the light areas. In the light areas, not the points, light areas in the ring, points come later. In the light areas, there was no oxygen to be found, but I found an increased percentage of copper, roughly 69%. And the deeper the measurement goes, the closer this gets to the starting values. The depth of the measurement, you can see on the right, the first measurement is on the surface, and with the laser scanning, with the laser-induced breakdown spectroscopy, you basically shoot little lasers onto the surface, and it goes deeper each time you shoot. So at the 7th measurement, you're a little bit inside the sample and comes closer to the original values, whereas the alloy has changed on the surface a little bit, or the composition of the alloy has changed a little bit on the surface. We go on to the points inside of the rings. There was also on the light surfaces no oxygen to be found, but here the change of the composition of the alloy becomes more drastic. You have 77.5% copper, 22.5% zinc. So yeah, you have varying percentages underneath, which have to be examined more closely with a better method in the future. Yeah, but the top layer is heavily changed from what it was. And don't get me wrong, every other area except for those light areas that I showed you was still covered with corrosion products. So we could summarize, yes, plasma treatment removes corrosion products at least partly on brass. And again, a little graph to summarize it even more. You can see at 5 minutes, there's still some oxygen left, which is completely gone on the light areas of the samples from 10 minutes onwards. Whereas there's a little trend to be seen that the longer treatment changes the alloy a little bit towards the copper end. Yes, for the roughness testing with a laser scanning microscope, it measures arithmetic roughness, which basically all that is important. The higher the value of the SA value, the rougher the surface is. So before the plasma treatment, the corroded sample was more smooth than afterwards, so it gained in roughness. So to summarize the results, there was definitely a visible change of color, at least on parts of the samples. There was definitely a removal of corrosion products, at least on parts of the samples. There was an increase of roughness. That could be due to corrosion, could also be due to the plasma treatment. That also needs further research. But one way to explain it, or you could start to explain it. If you have a corrosion, you basically have little cavities filled with corrosion products, and if the plasma removes those, you have like cavities without corrosion products, which are scanned more deeply. So it could be the corrosion process, but plasma also has the tendency to roughen up surfaces a little bit, at least on wood. There's the change of the alloy's composition, and that also begs the question: is that due to the plasma treatment, or was it done by the corrosion? Copper alloys, or no, brass undergoes sometimes a process of dezinkification, which is the zinc corroding before the copper. So it could be also due to the corrosion. And we have the high temperatures that I measured during the process. So to get back to the questions from the beginning, is it possible to remove corrosion products on brass using plasma? Yes, definitely, but only partly. Is it possibly applicable to boule-style objects? And that is a definite no, at least not yet. We use the stationary generator for the plasma, and that would be way too inaccurate, just go along those delicate lines in the marquetry. There is too high of a temperature. At 83 degrees Celsius, any glue that's underneath the metal is not very likely to stay the same, or might even deteriorate to a heavy extent. And the plasma effects on tortoiseshell, if you miss the metal, are not sufficiently examined, and there's way too much time needed doing the process I did. So 30 minutes to get a result I did is nowhere near close to having it used on real objects. There is the possibility of using handheld jets as in silver. It could be sometimes done in silver, but they are, in my opinion, they're way too weak. They only have an output of 18 watts, and us using 400 watts and them doing 18 watts, I don't think there will be any effect. So what could be done differently? Because it's definitely not researched enough. Maybe a different gas mixture could be used. One could change the parameters of the plasma generator, or a completely different generator, or maybe just completely change method. During this research, I also got introduced to what was called at the Institute plasma water, and it's water treated with plasma that had tweaked tweaked properties. No, the effects that it did. I'm sorry, I'm lacking the word. Basically, the plasma changed the water in some ways so that it would remove corrosion products more nicely, or would remove corrosion products in general. So that might be also a very interesting field of research. Yeah, I'd like to end on that. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm open to questions, of course.
Thank you, Nicolas. We now have a short question and answer session. Again, there are quite a few questions in the chat box. May I ask our speakers, Karay and Nicolas, to turn on their microphone only when you address a question to you? Okay, let's start. The first question is for Karay.
So, Karay, can you confirm that you tested on oak? And both Henning and Wilmot would like to know why you thought the discoloration or darkening occurred when you were using the poured agar.
Well, I can confirm that I tested that in oak wood, and well, I had some ideas why the wood appeared way darker after the cleaning. Maybe because of the induced water or the agar gel residues. But well, as I said, that is still a question I have for myself. There's definitely some further research needed. I can say certain why it appeared darker. It's just a hypothesis. Yeah, that has to be tested.
Thank you. And Julia Schultz would like to know why you compared the agar gel, which is wet cleaning, against dry cleaning methods.
Well, because the problem we often face with dry cleaning products is that they have a mechanical impact on the surface that well, pushes the dirt deeper into the pores of the wood. And the idea was that maybe with agar gel that has less mechanical impact on the surface, that could maybe be an alternative to these used dry cleaning products.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions for Nicolas?
I have one. So we have two actually. So how did you end up with the type of gas and the parameters? That is a question by Julia. Nicolas, did you hear the question?
Yes, sorry, I had to turn on my microphone.
Oh yeah, sorry.
The first question, the gas. The gas was suggested by the people in the institute who had some experience with it already, and the parameters were done by testing. We did some. Sorry, I can hear myself at the moment. Maybe.
Oh, I need to turn off my microphone. So.
Yeah, it's better. We did a couple of tests, of course, before we did the actual process, seeing how far the work difference had to be, seeing how much gas we had to use, seeing how much power we had to put through. That was all done by testing. We started off low and then we got higher. The gas flow we actually had to decrease a little bit because it was too quick at the beginning, too much gas at the beginning. Yeah, so we had to go down a little bit on that.
Then I will ask my question. Do you feel that this method is applicable on composite object surfaces?
The way I used it, definitely not, because it only at least I'm sorry. Can you turn off your microphone again? it's very...
Sorry, that's yeah.
The way I used it, definitely not. it's yeah, we had to use way too much power, and the temperatures that were involved were way too high, and yeah, depending on what object, you would also have to get it underneath the plasma generator, inside the box that the plasma generator would be in. So composite surfaces, I'd say not yet, but there's a lot of potential definitely in plasma. And yeah, I think it has been used on composite surfaces. I mean, it is used in medicine, all that too, for skincare, for wound disinfection. So all with lower parameters and less current, obviously. But yeah, I think there's a lot of potential in that and has to be researched further. So in the end, probably could be used. Yeah.
Good, thank you. There is another question from Julia. How long did you apply the plasma water compared to the method that you have used?
Oh yeah, I forgot to say that. That was I did the one on the left was 3 minutes and the other one was 5 minutes. So we pretty much had. There was also an effect with lower time, but I only applied it at 3 and 5 minutes and went on to 10 and 15, but that didn't add any effect. Did a little bit. Oh, thank you very much. It did a little bit. Did add a little bit of an effect, but yeah, basically there was a very quick reaction and way quicker than the original plasma methods.
Okay, thank you, Nicolas and Karay. And we will email with any outstanding questions if there are some. And I hand over to Shane.
Thank you, everyone. That brings us to the end of the second ConNext session for this year. And I'd like to give a huge thank you to our keynote speakers, Dana Melchiar and Heinrich Piening, for such fantastic talks. I think you had us all there, even though there was a bit of an overrun in timing, but I think you kept the entire audience enthralled. So thank you. We'd also like to thank Steffen, Patt, Karay Klenner and Nicolas Hannay for your talks. And of course, all the institutes and partners, and not least you, the audience, for making the event happen. The session next week is under the title "Holding It Together," and starts with the keynote speaker Bill Way, who retired recently as a conservation scientist for the Dutch Cultural Heritage Agency, and now has his own company called VibMech, focusing on vibration and mechanical engineering in cultural heritage. That session next week will be hosted by Kathy Gillis and Anna Badara. So see you all next Tuesday, same time, same place. Bye.
Bye.